Tonight, the cradle could fall. In Tunisia, where the Arab Spring began, the government is gone. Violent demonstrations continue. The judges are on strike. You're watching Arise News Hour. That is our top story. We'll have reports from inside Tunisia and analysis about its future. Plus, the latest pictures from the main cities.
Also in the program tonight, South Africa charges 19 Congolese rebels with plotting a coup. They face charges of trying to overthrow the government of Joseph Kabila in the DRC, and one is an American citizen. France says it wants to start pulling out of Mali next month. On the ground, the clashes continue. And Robben Island reality TV with Nelson Mandela's granddaughters.
Two years ago, a fruit seller burned himself to death in Tunisia and triggered the events that we now call the Arab Spring. Yesterday, a leading anti-Islamic politician, Chokri Belaid, was assassinated. That's triggered a different kind of chaos. Tonight, we look at what's come to the country and its implications for the whole region.
The Prime Minister said that he was forming a new government of technocrats. His own moderate Islamic party immediately rejected it. The judges and lawyers are on strike. Mr. Belaid was a human rights lawyer. 4 opposition parties have pulled out of the parliament. A general strike's been called for tomorrow. On the streets, there's been tear gas and stone throwing. The smashed window, the blood on the ground, the bullet holes. This is the scene of the assassination that has triggered political unrest in Tunisia. Chokri Belaid, an outspoken critic of the government, was shot dead at close range on his way to work. His assassin fled on the back of a motorcycle. The protest against his death continued today in the capital, Tunis. Police fired tear gas at demonstrators. They are calling for a new revolution and want the government to stand down. Last night, Prime Minister Hamadi Jabali went on television to announce that he would form a new government led by his moderate Islamic party until elections could be held. But that has been rejected by the ruling party, Ennahda. The demonstrations stretched as far away as Paris, where hundreds of Tunisian expatriates held a demonstration following the assassination. There, the French government condemned the killing. The French Foreign Minister, Laurent Fabius, said the start of the revolution was a struggle for dignity and freedom, and now violence is taking over. I'd like to strongly condemn the political assassination in Tunisia. I offer my support and the support of France to those who want to stop the violence. Chokri Belaid's death is the first political assassination in Tunisia since the Arab Spring uprising 2 years ago. The country's president, Monsef Mazouki, says the assassination should not affect Tunisia's revolution. Dr. Geeta Subramaniam is an expert in international politics and joins us via Skype live from Tunis. Dr. Subramaniam, thank you so very much for joining us. Can you tell us right now, what is the atmosphere like where you are?
Well, there are protests on the street, not directly outside my house, but in the center of town, in the same street that the protests took place in 2011. And the atmosphere is tense. People are very angry.
I'm wondering, can you tell me, how has the atmosphere been leading up to the assassination and the protests? Could you have predicted that something violent or terrible was going to happen?
Well, I mean, I think a political assassination, no, because there haven't been political assassinations, or they're not very well known in Tunisia. However, there have been some cases of Salafist violence which have gone unpunished, and people were getting very upset that there was no sort of action by the government to stop these sorts of actions happening.
One more thing about that atmosphere. Of course, we have seen pictures of the protests and the violence. How widespread is it? Is there a lot of it or just in pockets?
It's in pockets, but it's very condensed in pockets. I think you'll probably have seen from the pictures and news coverage you have that it's been condensed enough and security forces condensed enough that it's a very tense situation. They're barely able to keep the peace. Shopkeepers have been worried, and they're still running their businesses. I think people were starting to close up just recently, and businesses are closing in the center of town, braced for what could be worse violence on both sides. Nobody knows. Everyone's hoping it's not the case.
Yes, we certainly hope that things will calm down. Dr. Geeta Subramaniam, thank you very much for joining us via Skype.
The men accused of plotting a coup against President Kabila's Congolese government have made their first appearance at a Pretoria court today. Amid the chaos in the courthouse, the men's supporters protested their innocence. Heavily armed police guarded the Pretoria Magistrates Court as the 19 Congolese nationals arrested in South Africa for plotting to overthrow the mineral-rich government of the Democratic Republic of Congo appeared in court today. The prosecutor told the court the men, thought to be members of the dissident organization known as the Union of Nationalists for Renewal, approached undercover officers for a wish list for machine guns, radios, and even surface-to-air missiles. Supporters of the group packed the already full Pretoria courthouse to voice their support for the men.
No, not M23. Those people, you stayed with them, like all of them, I'm with them. Monday I was with them. They are our friends. They're not rebels. You understand? Kabila, you know what they are doing in Zuma. They know what they are doing in Zuma. This is Zuma's thing. You know what they are doing.
The men had been watched by the South African police and the intelligence service since September the 19th and were arrested on February the 5th near Johannesburg. The case was adjourned to February the 14th to give the South African and DRC investigators time to establish the citizenship of the...
Go ahead.
Back to our lead story, and that is Tunisia. 2 years later, Arab Spring. Could this be the Arab winter? And Imad Mesdoua, political analyst, specializes in Tunisian, other Arab Spring countries. Imad, as you were telling us earlier on, Arab Spring leading to an Arab winter?
Well, possibly. I think some of the political crises that we're now witnessing in Egypt and Tunisia are the result of grievances that have been simmering. You have societies that are increasingly polarized at the political level because the economic and social demands that were at the heart of the Arab Spring have not yet been addressed, because political parties in power are really coming to grips with governing because they've been used to being in the political opposition for so long.
We apologize again. We continue to have audio problems, and what you're saying is very important. We want to fix that. If we can't bring you back later on today, we'll get you back for sure. Thank you for your patience. We apologize to our viewers, and we'll have him back as soon as possible. French officials say that they want to begin pulling the country's troops out of Mali in March. France has 4,000 troops in Mali and has told the UN Security Council the mission should become a UN peacekeeping operation as soon as possible. Gavin Hill reports.
Surveying the war zone, soldiers from Chad fly in to help French and Malian troops fight the Islamist rebels in Kidal. It's part of the handing over of authority to West African and Malian troops. These are some of the men who will be charged with keeping the country under control. The French government has said its soldiers would start leaving Mali within weeks.
The French military mission in Timbuktu has been a success, so we are now to hand over much of the responsibility for Timbuktu's secretary to the Malian army. The Malian military will take up their role, though French troops will not be leaving Timbuktu completely.
But the locals want the French troops to stay.
The departure of French troops does not reassure us because we can't trust our military and the country is not stable, but we don't have a choice.
Following 3 weeks of airstrikes and a lightning ground advance, French troops are now pursuing the rebels in the remote northeast. France's defence minister has described the campaign as a real war that is far from won. Gavin Hill, Arise News.
Now, and what does the future hold for South Africa's troubled mining industry? Our economics and business editor Michael Wilson has that story and plenty more. Michael.
Jeff, thanks. It's been a tough year for South Africa's mining companies who've had to deal with increased costs, deadly wildcat strikes and plunging profits. And to make matters worse, at a meeting of Africa's mining industry, the Indaba, leaders in Cape Town this week, enthusiasm for South Africa's once towering industry was lacking. It's claimed that the world's major mining companies could be tempted to spend millions of dollars or billions of dollars developing operations elsewhere. Executives stressed the need for an investment-friendly environment, stable labour relations and a stop to violence and criminality. Despite all the problems, the managing director of the Indaba was positive about the effect of the various sides of the industry meeting together and talking about the difficulties.
I think it's done a good step forward. I think any time that we can bring investors together with mining CEOs and mining ministers to talk about the prevailing scenario within the country, I think that helps alleviate concerns. I think it gives them a sense of transparency. So yeah, I think we've made a good step forward.
Now to the stock markets, a mixed picture today with financials leading the gains in Johannesburg, while Nigeria stocks fell nearly 0.75%. The standout today, shares in Kenya rose for the 7th straight day to a 25-month high. In the words of one analyst, there's a lot of appetite from foreign investors. Let's have a look at the commodities. Now, Brent oil, fairly steady and keeping well above the level at the beginning of the year, $110. Gold, those narrow trading ranges continue, and with the upcoming Chinese New Year, it's expected there'll be reduced trade. The platinum story, I think you know it well enough now, given the concern that supplies will decline from South Africa, which produces about 73% of global output. Remember, on Tuesday, the outgoing CEO of Anglo American said the industry was, as she put it, in crisis. Thus, the precious metals highest level for more than 16 months. In currencies, not a great deal of movement today. $1 buys you R8.85 or 157.3 naira, and that's 87 Kenyan shillings and 50 cents. Right, today saw another significant snapshot of the South African economy. I spoke to our correspondent, Sidi Bishop, in Johannesburg.
The latest figure shows that the manufacturing sector is sliding a bit, though the indication is not that clear-cut, because if you look at the annual number looks strong, but the month-to-month number seems a little bit subdued. This is an indication that we're not actually competing fairly with our trading partners. An analyst I spoke to earlier said there's a report that came from the Germans and the Dutch indicating that they didn't have the similar amount of inputs they always have from South Africa. The input numbers have actually dropped. And the reason for the drop in the manufacturing output would be the same culprits we've been speaking about this week. Electricity hikes, as well as higher than inflation salaries, which were bargained for last year. Then in the entire sectors last year, the salaries were much higher than inflation. Input costs have risen, the petrol price has risen, as we said, and then the transporting goods from here into the harbors and back from the harbors to here also has escalated. The transporting goods also through aircrafts have also escalated because of the hikes in imports.
So as we've said, I mean, we've with you had a very close idea about what's going on in the South African economy. It doesn't bode very well for the strength of the rand, finally, does it, Sidi?
No, it surely doesn't bode well for the rand. It actually puts our central bank in a difficult position, because the central bank has been charged with a mandate of making sure that they put a lid on inflation. And that mandate was slightly maneuvered last year to include economic growth as well. So this time around, they have to really walk on a tightrope, trying to balance the inflation and trying to make sure that they prop up growth. And normally when that happens, if their mandate was just inflation, they would toy a little bit with the rand, try to make sure that they boost the rand a little bit, but they cannot move because the inflation signals are not very good, which means our growth is not very positive.
City Bishop there in Johannesburg. That's business for now. Still to come, claims of illegal logging and timber theft on a major scale in Mozambique.
All right, Michael, thank you. We'll see you a little later on in the program. But right now, U.S. officials have agreed to release documents justifying drone strikes on Americans suspected of working with terrorist groups. Our Washington correspondent, Colin Campbell, joins us live. Colin, it appears that this secret drone base has been an open secret for quite some time in Washington, yes?
Yeah, as I said yesterday, this is not one of Washington's best kept secrets. It was known by a number of media outlets who had agreed not to release that information until a specified amount of time had passed. But there was a media outlet that had, well, not necessarily threatened, but said that it warned that it would release this information. So the Washington Post also released this information. This was something that was kept, and it was basically embargoed by the White House, and they had planned to release this information later on. The release of these documents of the targeted killings of Americans overseas is expected to actually bolster Brennan's credentials as he tries to lead the CIA. The White House hopes that the release of this classified information will help his cause as the counterterrorism official in the White House for the past 4 years, heading these drone strikes and basically increasing the spread and the proliferation of the U.S.'s drone program. So this is something the White House definitely wanted to do. They think that this will help Brennan. And of course, this also comes as the development that they did admit to this drone base being in Saudi Arabia that originated the killings of Anwar al-Awlaki and Samir Khan, and then, of course, al-Awlaki's son later on, Abdul Rahman.
Colin, also, you know, as you just said, Brennan is facing the Senate confirmation process. What other tough issues will he face besides this drone issue during his confirmation process?
One of the biggest things is not only the drone issue, but how the drones were being used. And of course, the targeted killings, but not only that, the innocent people who were killed during these strikes, which they call collateral damage. Of course, he is expected to face a lot of heckling and protesting. One of the groups that's heading the protests and demonstrations is Code Pink, and they have been very outspoken against the use of drones in areas like Pakistan, Yemen, and now Northern Africa. They're expected to be there in big numbers on the Hill today to protest Brennan's nomination. They're saying that this, the use of drones basically increases anti-U.S. sentiment overseas, and they're concerned about the CIA's use and the CIA's chain of command. They say that with the use of drones and the use of military force, there's usually a chain of command and a protocol. And what Code Pink claims is that in the CIA, there is a very vague use of action using drones and the use of intel that's being traded among agents and between countries. So they're raising a lot of red flags here, and they're very concerned about how this drone program would be carried out, how it has been carried out, and its implications for the future.
But real quick, Colin, this is Jeff Koinange. Despite the loud talk, despite the protests, planned protests, these confirmation hearings will go ahead, won't they?
Yeah, they will go ahead. Brennan is expected to be confirmed, but it could go either way. I mean, of course, other nominations have had their difficulties, but they were definitely expected to go through. Brennan will definitely face much more of a struggle here. I think that the popular belief is that in the end, he will still be confirmed, but this is still going to be a tough battle for him in front of Congress.
All right, Colin Campbell there reporting from Washington, D.C. Thanks so much, Colin, as always.
And
Debbie?
we surely have not heard the last of that.
No, we haven't.
We're going to go back to one of our top stories today, and that, of course, is the conflict in Mali and France's plans to pull out of the region by April, by the end of March, as it were. We are joined by Susie Dennison, who is the author of the EU, Algeria, and Northern Mali Question, and she's here live with us. Thank you so much, Ms. Dennison, for being with us. First of all, let me just ask you, how is this conflict, France's involvement, looking in France and in Europe as a whole?
Well, I think that at home in France, the decision to intervene in Mali has been quite a successful one for François Hollande. He's had broad cross-party support from the beginning, some questioning around 10 days into the conflict from opposition, from the right, about how long the conflict was going to take and the extent to which there were clear military objectives. But nothing really, to question the fact to have gone in the first place. And we've also seen strong support from across Europe too. Only military support in terms of transport and equipment from 3 other European member states. But again, no questioning that France made the right move.
Susie, is there no surprise that there's a copycat effect in these countries? What happens in Egypt today happens in Tunisia tomorrow, happens somewhere else the next day. Looks like they're all watching each other to see who's going to protest today. Whose turn is it?
I mean, I would say that the circumstances in Mali are quite specific. And although there are clear links to what has happened in other countries that were affected by the Arab Spring, there are a whole series of factors which meant that there has been unrest in northern Mali over a longer period. But nevertheless, yes, there are certainly links.
I wonder, of course, Hollande has been very definite that he wants to get the French troops out within about a couple months, which seems to me very quick. There's got to be the training and the readying of the African forces to take their place. Is his goal realistic, or do you think that the goal line is going to move as time goes on?
I mean, my best guess is that probably France will have to maintain an interest over a longer period than up to the end of March. I think although the first phase of the conflict has been very smooth and the process of moving the Islamist groups out of control of the urban areas of northern Mali has been very successful, there is a long slog ahead now in terms of reconciliation in the country, in terms of state building, and in terms of tackling the fact that all of the systems have broken down there. So I think that France and all of the other countries that are involved in the country are going to have to continue to take an interest. That said, France has been very clear from the beginning that they see this as a short intervention, and they wanted to hand over to African troops as soon as practicable. And to some extent, the Malian troops have been having that training on the job, fighting alongside the French forces since the beginning of this year. And I believe there are 6 other African neighbouring countries with troops readying to move in. So I think that there is a clear game plan in mind, which the international community is behind.
Great. Susie Dennison, thanks so much. Appreciate your insight. All right. In other news, anti-government protests in Iraq have raised fears that the country could descend into civil war. Just 2 months to key provincial elections, demonstrators are calling for the reform of anti-terror laws that they say are being used to target Sunnis.
No to sectarianism, yes to the overthrow of Maliki. One of many slogans visible as Sunni Muslims gather in their thousands across Iraq to rail against the Shia Muslim-led authorities. The Sunnis feel they are being targeted and discriminated against and have called on Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki to quit. Protests have raged since late December, and with key provincial elections looming in April, Iraq is mired in crisis. Azhad al-Janabi organizes demonstrations in the western province of Anbar.
The government's betting on boredom and that the protesters will just go back home, but that millions of them will keep to the streets until all their demands are met, which is their basic right.
Maliki accuses anti-government protesters of abusing their freedoms and causing chaos.
You want freedom, democracy, security and stability to start reconstruction, but at the same time you're doing things that breach security and stability.
Rallies were largely peaceful until soldiers fired on protesters in Fallujah, west of Baghdad, in late January, killing 8 people and dramatically raising tensions. In an apparent revenge attack, unidentified gunmen killed 2 Iraqi soldiers and kidnapped 3 others. Politicians have called for a reduction of security forces in flashpoint areas, though admit this may have unintended consequences.
We have recommended to withdraw the army and police forces from Ramadi and Fallujah, as well as from all the areas where demonstrations have been held. But what will happen after that? Some people say they're afraid Al-Qaeda will come back to turn these areas into a new base for terrorism.
Political analyst Ihsan al-Shimari says the current unrest could push Iraq back towards the brutal sectarian war that left tens of thousands dead in the wake of the US-led invasion in 2003.
I think that this crisis is the most serious, especially because there is an attempt to replay the civil and sectarian violence of 2006 and 2007 that Iraq left behind.
Iraqi authorities have taken several steps in a bid to curb the protests. They claim to have released around 3,000 prisoners and have pledged to raise the salaries of anti-Al-Qaeda militiamen. A lasting solution to Iraq's current political impasse, however, remains unclear.
And you are watching the News Hour right here on Arise. Our top story this evening, the Tunisian government's dissolved and violent demonstrations continue after the assassination of a leading opposition politician earlier this week. South Africa charges 19 people with plotting a coup. They face charges of trying to overthrow the government of Joseph Kabila in the DRC, and one is an American citizen. And France says it wants to start pulling out of Mali next month. On the ground, the clashes continue.
Also ahead on the show tonight, 65 abandoned jets are clogging Nigeria's airports. Some of them are now being broken up and cleared away. Debbie.
All right, Jeff, we are going to return again to our top story, talk about the situation in Tunisia. We apologize for those who have been with us from the beginning of this show. We had some technical difficulties, but I think they are fixed. So we're going to welcome AMAND Mesdoua, who is a political analyst and specializes in Tunisia and other Arab Spring countries. Thank you for hanging in there with us.
Thing.
Third time is the charm. Of course, the Arab Spring started a couple of years ago. Have the recent incidents indicated that perhaps we're going into an Arab winter?
Well, I think people were talking about the Arab winter as soon as the Islamic parties began to take hold in these Arab Spring countries. Realistically, what we're seeing now is an increased polarization at the political level of these societies, Tunisia, Libya, Egypt, and others, as a result of unaddressed economic and social grievances that were at the heart of the revolutions from the get-go.
Iman, let me ask you this. You mentioned the 3 countries, Tunisia, Egypt, and Libya, where the Arab Spring, I guess, spilled over, if you will, domino effect. How come it never affected Algeria?
Well, I think Algeria was, to a certain extent, the first of all of these countries to face the Arab Spring. In the late 80s, Algeria faced a very difficult period of political transition, followed by a 10-year civil conflict, which really marked that country's recent history. And I think Algerian population was sort of reluctant to engage in civil violence or politically motivated violence, at least, because of some of the trauma that had caused. Just some figures to explain that. 100 to 200,000 people died during that decade, which Algerians refer to as the Dark Decade. I think that served as a sort of deterrent in the minds of many.
I wonder, is this just a Tunisia issue, or is this indication of a bigger problem?
Well, I think it is the indication of a bigger problem, as I was saying earlier, the issue of unaddressed grievances, especially at the economic level and at the political level. I think there were accusations, for example, in Tunisia, that the ruling party, Ennahda, was amassing too much power. and was maybe turning a blind eye to the increased radicalization of some factions of that party. And that radicalization should be seen in a wider context of regional instability. You have more and more groups that are being radicalized, and I think the perfect proof of that are the latest incidents in Algeria, Libya, and Mali, which are the result of increased Islamization of youth that are marginalized and disenfranchised economically.
Coming back to the latest incident of the assassination in Tunisia, will that last? Will that carry on in the coming days? These pictures that we keep seeing on a daily basis, will that carry on?
Well, it's always difficult to predict these things, so I'm not going to predict that. But what I can say is that it certainly is a crisis that is likely to affect the transition or an event that is likely to affect the transition in a very symbolic way. This is the first time Tunisians really are faced with this kind of issue where there is a politically motivated assassination and of a staunch opponent of the transition government, of the Al-Nahda government. So that's going to mark the minds. I think the strikes that you're seeing and the boycott that some of these groups are saying that they're going to engage in, the opposition groups in the assembly, is certainly not going to lead to an appeased moment in Tunisia's transition for the weeks and months to come.
We thank you so much for your perspective and for your patience. That's Imad Mesdoua. We appreciate it. Cheers. And now in Nigeria, the authorities have started clearing up unwanted jets that clog the country's airports. These redundant planes have not flown for years, and now they're being recycled.
This aircraft graveyard, as they call it, has been an eyesore at the Murtala Mohammed International Airport for many years. Some of Africa's stricken airlines have used the far north end of the airport as a dumping ground for failed airlines. Now, in a bid to spruce up the airport, the Nigerian authorities have begun efforts to disassemble the aircrafts and to clear the runway.
Over the years, had one aircraft after another abandoned, and eventually they became so many they sort of took up a space and made it seem as if that was a graveyard for scrap aeroplane.
Some of the insolvent airlines even left planes still loaded with first-class china and aircraft manuals. One of Nigeria's own flagship airlines, Air Nigeria, which went bust last year, are among the aircrafts crowding the runway at the international airport.
In something like 35 years, we haven't improved on our airport infrastructure. So for many people in the organization, it's a new thing. And the skills of design, of project management, of supervision, etc., we're honing them now because the organization was a bit rusty in all of these things.
It is thought that over 65 aircrafts are scattered at various runways across Nigeria. Many of them a product of the global recession. This cleanup is seen as a good opportunity to put the ghost of the difficult years which blighted the aviation industry to rest. Jason Joavel, Arise News.
Now, the aviation industry in Nigeria is not the only sector of the economy that's struggling. The country's manufacturing industry is in dire need of a shakeup. As Will Took now reports, one female entrepreneur is hoping to lead the revolution.
It all started with ill-fitting pyjamas. Determined to provide better clothing for her children, Nigerian entrepreneur Adenike Ogunlesi set up Rough and Tumble 16 years ago. She started with $80,000 scraped together from personal savings and loans from family members. It was an investment that paid off. Today, Rough and Tumble rakes in revenues of over $1 million a year and is a recognised brand across West Africa. The clothes are made in Europe before being shipped to Nigeria for the finishing touches. It's the lack of a strong Nigerian manufacturing sector that's the main obstacle to Ogunlesi's business growing.
The industry does not have the support in terms of skills that I would say I would want to further expand into different sections. That doesn't exist here. So I don't want us to go into an early grave.
And with her eyes set on the lucrative adult market, Ogunlesi believes transforming her country's manufacturing industry is the key to creating jobs and producing vibrant clothing. Will Took, Arise News.
And now for a roundup of the other stories of the day. Thousands of women have taken to the streets in Cairo to condemn sexual violence. They say it's being used to scare them away from taking part in political rallies. Around 25 women were reportedly assaulted in recent protests against Muslim Brotherhood President Mohamed Morsi. Islamic scholars are assessing the damage in Timbuktu. It had been hoped that many of the priceless artifacts housed in the historic city had been smuggled out before the recent violence, but these priceless illuminated books were burned as militants fled the UNESCO World Heritage Site. And ivory poaching is on the rise in Gabon. New research by conservationists say more than 11,000 forest elephants have been killed in the Central African country in the last 8 years. Gabon is home to over half of the continent's forest elephants.
Now, when central bankers speak, the markets listen. Our economics and business editor Michael Wilson is here with more on what's been driving the markets. Michael.
Thank you both. Neither the UK Central Bank nor the ECB made any change to their base rates today. The euro had the biggest one-day percentage fall against the dollar since June. It also fell to session lows against sterling and the yen after the European Central Bank President Mario Draghi said there was a risk that the Eurozone outlook will disappoint investors. European stocks, significant falls on those comments from Mario Draghi. There may be more pullbacks as well. Some analysts think that a fresh wave of cuts to European company profit forecasts is on its way. That will leave firms well placed to outperform later in the year and thus give a boost to the stock market. We'll see about that. On Wall Street, little for investors to celebrate as stocks fell after the latest readings of the US economy. Well, for more on that, let's join Chitra Norbach in New York. And a mixed picture, actually. You've got retail sales and the weekly jobless figures. Chitra, fill us in.
Michael, I don't know if you're a big shopper, but the early numbers on January retail sales are showing mixed results. Analysts are expecting sales growth of about 3.5%, but this is a decrease from last year. One of the possible reasons on that is that payroll taxes have increased for many Americans this year. That puts less dollars in their pocket, and this may have caused a dampen on spending. You know, companies like Costco and Limited Brands, which has the popular Victoria's Secret line, they've showed positive growth, positive sales. But you know, January is a tough month for retailers, and that's because it's after the holiday season, and they're trying to get rid of last year's inventory. Switching over to jobs, we've seen some positive momentum on the jobs front. According to the Labor Department, last week's jobless claims dropped by about 5,000. Economists were looking for a drop more closer to 10,000, but this does show positive growth from a job perspective.
Now, Home Depot is hiring, isn't it? Does that mean good news for the housing market?
The housing market is definitely helping the job situation. Home Depot has announced that they're going to hire 80,000 associates this spring, which is a big increase over last year. Spring is their strongest season, and this is where they find a lot of their new full-time associates from this seasonal hiring. Michael, you and I have talked about the housing situation.
Sure.
New and existing home sales are going up. People wanted to do renovations, and so Home Depot is expecting a better season over last year.
Now, pop star and a well-known actress has signed a deal with Netflix. What's going on there, Chitra?
Netflix has signed a big deal with Queen Latifah to distribute films from her production company. Queen Latifah is the well-known rapper and actress. You may have seen her in the musical Chicago. Her production company is Flavor Unit Entertainment. They've put out movies like Beauty Shop, Bringing It Home, and they've put out a new series called House of Cards with Kevin Spacey. Michael, I hear that her casting director might be calling you soon.
I hope so, Chitra. Thanks very much indeed. Now, illegal logging and timber smuggling in Mozambique is rife, according to an independent campaign group. The Environmental Investigation Agency says nearly half the timber exported to China is illegal and implicates Mozambican politicians and Chinese traders in the smuggling scam. Mozambique, one of the least developed economies in the world. Julian NEWMAN, campaign director of the EIA, is with us. Give us an idea of the scale of this, if you would.
What we found basically is massive resource theft in Mozambique, which is costing the country millions of dollars in lost revenue, and all the profits being made by timber traders, mostly in China.
No. And who is actually complicit in this then? Because obviously it has to take people to get the stuff over there and to allow whomever it is to take it. How does that work?
Well, what investigations have found is that the logging sector in Mozambique is riddled with corruption, and this is what allows this trade to take place. We're talking about major export of logs, illegal logs, being smuggled out. You can't do that without complicity of some officials. And what we found as well through investigations in the north, in Cabo Delgado province, is that some of the Chinese companies have very strong connections with some Mozambique politicians, even ministers. And this is obviously greases the trade and allows it to happen.
I suppose because Mozambique being the kind of place that it is, as you mentioned, one of the poorest nations in the world, this kind of stuff's inevitable, isn't it? Because people want to make money, don't they?
Well, there's a possibility of making money, but also the country's losing money really out of this. The money's being accrued in places like Hong Kong and southern China. And any chance to provide an industry that will benefit the Mozambique people through jobs and wealth is being squandered.
So it's the taxpayers, or the taxes that are actually being lost to the country. How do you sell that, though, to people who are trading illegally? It's a difficult one, isn't it?
It is, but you need to take a slightly long term. I mean, illegal business is ultimately unsustainable. You might make quick money, but then it's going to be finished, because we're already hearing from traders that they expect the Mozambique forest to be depleted of commercial timber within 10 years. Then it's gone. The country will be bereft of its wood.
Would you expect to be able to give any kind of sensible appeal to China to stop this happening, for example?
We hope that China will look at our report and take some responsibility, because obviously as the importer of these wood, they are driving the demand. Demand's been driven by luxury furniture in China, and we're appealing to China to put in place rules that make it illegal to import stolen timber in
I mean,
China.
still, I suppose at the end of the day, you do need some sort of administrative system, like some part of the World Trade Organization, some other body, to be able to legislate about that. And of course, neither of those countries are particularly interested in that, I would imagine, at the moment.
Well, when you look at the global timber trade, there's no global agreement, but we've seen countries like the US and Europe take steps to exclude illegal timber, so we want China to do the same.
Thank you very much indeed. Interesting story. Now, Somali expats are returning to the capital, Mogadishu, encouraged by signs of stability after decades of chaos. Some see their battered homeland as a profitable business frontier.
Convenience stores like Nabad supermarkets are a new sight in Mogadishu. 2 decades of lawlessness and poverty caused by civil war has made access to essential items almost impossible until recently. In 2011, Somalia's Islamist militant group Al-Shabaab was expelled from a string of strategic towns, including Mogadishu, and last year a president and a prime minister were elected in a national vote. It was enough to encourage Somali national Saeed Nur home from Sweden.
As Mogadishu returned to normal, we saw a real need for a supermarket like this one in the city. We've started small but plan to invest more than $100,000 US, and there are a lot of customers coming here for shopping.
The supermarket receives new stock from Dubai and China a few times a week and makes about $2,000 US a month. Former UK resident Sarah Mustafa says the emergence of new businesses is a sign of better things to come.
Today I'm shopping in Mogadishu supermarket. That's something that never happened before, and it's first time it's happening in Mogadishu. So that's been allowed by the peace and the security that is stable in Mogadishu today. So we welcome the people that wants to come.
But security analysts are cautious to say that all is well in Somalia following a recent suicide bombing. There are claims Al-Shabaab rebels are mounting a new campaign against the government. The country's new businesses will be hoping stability and security prevail. YUKIYA, Arise News.
Really ask for a better contrast of business stories, and that could you? You've got illegal logging going on in Mozambique to China, which will take, I suspect that'll take years to fix, because you have to admit, and yet you see war-torn, it's a horrible word journalists use, but you know what I mean, places like Somalia, and the entrepreneurial spirit is straight back in there. There's hope for countries, isn't there, when people have the sort of, you know, the guts to be able to go back and set things up. I think those stories of the diaspora, as it were, going back are really worth pursuing, don't you? I mean, it's
stories of hope, Michael, and especially after more than 20 years.
And determination.
Yeah.
You know?
And we spend our lives, don't we, going around to disasters. We were talking about that earlier today, weren't we, in New Orleans and the rest of it. You've done the same. And it's lovely to see that trickling back of something, which, you know, sharing the business community with the general community.
That's right. That's right. all attention on Africa. They're
Good,
coming
nice
back.
news. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael.
We
As
need
always.
that. We appreciate that. In case you're just tuning in, you are watching the Arise News Hour.
You are indeed, and you'll like this story, Debbie. Nelson Mandela's granddaughters have released the first image of him in 7 months and say he is healthy following his release from hospital in December. They were promoting their new reality show, which reveals what it's like coming from such a famous family.
Nelson Mandela's granddaughter's in the cell where he spent nearly 20 years of his sentence. It's one of the scenes from their new reality show, Being Mandela.
It's very much a family show, you know, it's like family dynamics, family interactions, you know, and just some of the journeys we go on as a family, like, you know, visiting Robben Island for the first time since my grandfather's been released, you know, going back to, you know, Robben Island, you know, taking a journey to Swaziland where my dad's side is from, where his family's from.
Okay. They're basically just talking about how he was rushed to hospital yesterday. Yeah. And they're like basically saying that like he hasn't been well the whole week, which is not true.
The program follows sisters SWATI Dlamini and ZAZIWE DLAMINI-MANAWAY going about their everyday lives and shows how they deal with the media coverage surrounding their granddad's health. They released this photo of him for the show. Taken just last week, it's the first image of the 94-year-old since he was released from hospital in December.
He's in great health. He's doing very well. We actually went to see him the day we were traveling out here, just to say bye, and you know that we're leaving, and we took the kids by, you know, just to say bye. So he's doing very well. He's in very good health.
Okay, Ma, love you. All right, then.
Their grandmother Winnie Mandela features on the show, but could we see Mandela make a guest appearance too?
Well, he definitely knows about it, but he hasn't even, we haven't shown him an episode yet. Our grandmother is very much in the show. You'll see her in the show. You know, she's very supportive of us. Both our grandparents are.
We work at the Nelson Mandela Square, and it's such a great honor. I mean, our office literally sits right above the statue. So looking out of the windows of our office when we see our grandfather, it's just a drive, and it's just an honor, and it gives us that push to actually work harder because we know that we're doing it for him.
Being Mandela airs in America this weekend, and the sisters say that the program will show they are just like any normal family, despite their famous grandfather. Lance Santos, Arise News.
Well, moving on to another story. Cancer is killing 10 million people a year, and that grim toll is rising faster in Africa than anywhere else. Arise News' Heather Scott reports a lack of high-tech screening equipment and the prevalence of hepatitis B and C in Africa have helped push cancer rates higher than ever before.
This is Zambia's first and only specialized cancer treatment center. It's in the capital city of Lusaka. This scanning machine is state-of-the-art, but it's hundreds of miles away from much of Zambia's population. And in Nigeria, in a hospital in Abuja, this damaged and outdated radiotherapy machine lies in pieces. In Vienna this week, at a conference to mark World Cancer Day, the UN's nuclear watchdog chief warned that controlling cancer rates costs money, money that poorer countries aren't spending.
One of the most persistent myths about cancer is that it is mainly a disease of wealthy countries. In fact, around 70% of cancer deaths occur in developing countries.
Some cancers are caused by hepatitis B and C, both common in Africa. But Amano says that the main cause of Africa's cancer epidemic is the lack of high-tech medical equipment.
It is estimated that there is a shortage of around 5,000 radiotherapy machines in developing countries. If we see on the map of the African continent, we can identify many countries in which there is no single cancer machines. That means that millions of people in Africa and elsewhere have no access to diagnostic services or treatment. Too many die of conditions that are actually treatable. This is an immense human tragedy.
Access to affordable drugs and trained oncologists is another major challenge for many African countries. Heather Scott, Arise News.
Sports now. And the Africa Cup of Nations semi-finals took place last night in South Africa. Nigeria eased through to their first Africa Cup Nations final in 13 years with a comfortable victory over Mali. Celebrations erupted throughout Nigeria as they thrashed Mali 4-1 at the Moses Mabhida Stadium in Durban. Super Eagles fans are now looking to end their 19-year wait for their third Nations Cup title. They're going to the final as odds-on favourites to lift the trophy. The big shock of the night came in the second game of the evening. Burkina Faso reached their first Nations Cup final by beating Ghana on penalties in a dramatic and controversial semi-final. Our sports reporter Ife Fatunase will be telling us why in just a moment. England's football team are celebrating their first win over Brazil in 23 years. Last night's friendly at Wembley ended in a 2-1 victory to the hosts. Wayne Rooney took England into the lead during the first half with this finish. Brazilian striker Fred levelled after the break. But then a spectacular strike from Frank Lampard put England back in front. Now, a year-long investigation into Australian sport has found that the use of banned drugs is widespread. The Australian Crime Commission revealed that scientists, coaches and support staff were all involved in the provision of performance-enhancing drugs.
The findings are shocking and they'll disgust Australian sports fans. The work that the Australian Crime Commission has done has found that the use of prohibited substances, including peptides, hormones and illicit drugs, is widespread amongst professional athletes.
As always, our sports reporter Ife Fatunase joins us in the studio. Ife, doping, doping, doping.
Here we go again. The last 12 months, the ACC, the Australian Crime Commission, have been looking into this. As you say, it goes across the board. Players, support staff, their team, scientists, it seems everyone was involved in this. Now, the ACC believe that it's by an organised crime syndicate that supplied the drugs to the players, or to supply the drugs in general. But they're not telling us just yet. They won't tell us which teams, which players, which sports were behind this. They don't want to tell us yet because for legal reasons, but the problem with doing that is it creates suspicion across the board. Australian fans going to watch their games over the next few weeks won't know which games they're watching, they won't know what the deal is, they're not going to be too sure. I can understand why they're doing it, but you can see what the problem the Australian fans are going to have. And Australia itself, big sporting country. They love their sport, cricket, swimming, they're really good across everything. So this is going to really shock the fans and they're just not going to be happy about this. So we'll just have to wait and see until we find out.
I think that's probably what's so striking is that it is so widespread. And of course, this is not the first time.
Exactly. I mean, I feel one of the things, every time I'm here, I'm telling you about another story. I mean, we have had Lance Armstrong, Lance Armstrong draping. I think it was earlier in the week when I talked about Rasmussen, the other cyclist. And then I was talking about match fixing in football. So sport in general is, unfortunately, fortunately or unfortunately, it's not one particular sport. It's sport across the board. So it's just a shame for all sport really at the moment.
Ife, we can't let you go without talking about these Cup of Nations finals. And I know you have predicted Nigeria from day one.
I predicted Nigeria-Mali. No, I predicted Nigeria-Ghana, didn't it? Right. But it's Nigeria-Burkina Faso. Yeah. It is great for Burkina Faso. The first time they've ever made it to the finals. Finals are on Sunday. There was quite a lot of controversy for them getting there. They had a goal disallowed. They had a player sent off who shouldn't have been sent off. In fact, they should have got a penalty. The game ended 1-1, but it went through to penalties. But Burkina Faso deserved to go through. If you watched the game, you'd have seen it was the right decision in the end. Yeah. They should have gone through, and they'll be facing Nigeria and hopefully losing.
You know your prediction.
I'm sorry, Burkina Faso fans, but I'm hoping.
I don't know. It's going to be interesting. Who's going to be hungrier, the one who's been there before, Nigeria, or Burkina Faso?
Exactly. Yeah. So I mean,
it'll be interesting.
Either way, you'll be good. I mean, if Burkina Faso do it, it'll be great for their country as well, but hopefully Nigeria.
All right, Ife, thank you so much. You always bring good information. Well, we have one more package for you, and it's about Gregory Porter, the man who sounds like Nat King Cole. He's up for a major music award.
That's right, and it could confirm his status as an A-list music star. Our business and economics editor and secret jazz fan, Michael Wilson, reports.
Papa, don't you frettin', don't forget that one day you was in my shoes, somehow you paid your...
This is the song American artist Gregory Porter hopes will earn him a Grammy. Back in 2010, his first album, Water, was nominated for Best Jazz Vocal Album. Now, 2 years on, he's in the spotlight again, this time going head-to-head with the likes of Beyoncé and Anita Baker, having been nominated for Best Traditional R&B Performance with Be Good.
But I wanna make your daughter my wife.
I incorporate R&B, soul, blues, gospel into what I do with jazz, and so yeah, it's an honor. It's an honor to be nominated in any category for the Grammy, so it's very exciting. The roots of my music are Marvin Gaye, Nat King Cole, Donny Hathaway. These are the people that I think about when I sing songs.
With just 2 albums to his name, he's already being compared to his idols.
There's magic in the group, the music, his voice is just fabulous. I felt the soaring soul of Marvin Gaye all evening.
It's the future of gospel, jazz, soul and blues. It's perfect.
Papa, don't you fret, and don't forget, one day you was in my shoes.
Porter began singing as a child in his mother's church. He found his voice after several years on the jazz circuit and then took Broadway by storm before striking out as a solo artist. In this song from his second album, he tries to convince the father of the woman he loves to give him her hand in marriage.
This is my own story, yes. I wrote the song based on really an argument from my then girlfriend's father. He called and, you know, what are your intentions with my daughter?
Are you married now?
Yeah, I married her, yes.
Having convinced his fiancée's father of his good credentials, Gregory Porter must now convince the judges of his musical talents at the 55th Grammy Awards.
Real good, real good hand.
My, he sounds great. Is he your new favorite now, Michael?
I've liked him for quite a few years, actually. The great thing about him is, and you'd appreciate this being a singer, you've got a lovely voice, I've heard you sing, is that, you know, he's got to the age of over 40 and he's just a few years ago found his voice. It's incredible. And the great thing about him is, and this is what jazz people much more knowledgeable than me say, you know, when he gets up to that microphone, he actually owns it, because he actually worked his way through stage shows, and he is just as happy singing a cappella, you know, without no accompaniment as he is with the band. But he's just really, really now found his voice, and I hope he makes it, because he richly deserves it. It's a wonderful mix of R&B and jazz, those kind of fringes, and the age range of the people who love him, you know, young and old. I mean, what more can you ask for?
Well done, Michael. Very passionate. You have a jazz show on the radio, don't you?
Yeah.
All right.
Jazz FM.
Thanks for joining us. It's been a great time having you. See you tomorrow, same time?
Yeah.
Same
I'll
place?
be here, will you?
I will be here.
And we hope you'll be here.